videotaping the sermons to be able to share them on our website. So bear with random beepy noises from time to time while we perfect this, if there's ever such a thing. It's good to see everybody here on a Labor Day weekend. We recognize and we honor labor and all those who labor among us on this weekend. So it's an especially good time to be together. I want to jump right into our sermon today, because since we last saw beautiful, beautiful baby Moses in that basket, a few things have happened that you may want to know about before we make our way over to holy ground. Has anybody here ever seen novelas? Anybody ever see a novela? Yes? Okay, some confessions here. Novelas are like the Spanish version of soap operas, but they're kind of different in pace, and they don't last like 20 years, and they're more like dramatic, because we are. And so, you know, there's always like these really intense bursts of like fabulous events and devastation. So reading the book of Exodus sometimes reminds me of this novela. So we're in our next installation, we're at the edge of our seats, what's going to happen? Basically, one day Moses, all grown up, went out and he saw the Hebrew people suffering as they labored. He witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew man, and Moses killed the Egyptian. And he looked around first to make sure nobody was watching. So he buried him in the sand, thinking that he had not been seen. The next day, he saw two Hebrews fighting and going at it, and when he tried to stop them, guess what the Hebrews said? The Hebrews said, "You're not the boss of me. What are you going to do? Kill me like you killed that Egyptian dude?" Uh-oh. So then the plot thickens. He realizes that he had been seen, that likely the Pharaoh was going to find out that he had killed one of these Egyptians, and sure enough, he does. Pharaoh finds out, and he sends to have Moses killed again. Not too successful with that. Next. That's our little baby Moses, and from that we keep moving into our next slide, because Moses fled to the land of Midian. And in Midian he went to a well. One day while he was at that well, someone started harassing these women who were there to just get water from the well, as one would need to do for life. And just as women had rescued baby Moses, he was able to kind of pay it forward or pay it back, and he was able to rescue these women, stop the harassment, let them get their water, help them on their way, with the good fortune that these women were pretty well connected. They ended up being the daughters of the priest of Midian, who offers Zipporah in marriage to Moses. Together they had a son, Gershom. This all happens in like 2 or 3 verses, because this is like a really action-packed novela that we're following here. So meanwhile, the Israelites continue to be oppressed. Chapter 2, verses 23 to 25 say that out of slavery their cry for help rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. That's a good thing. And that's where today's passage comes in, as we find Moses tending to his father-in-law's sheep at Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And anytime you see a shepherd in the Bible, you know something is going to happen. That's one of those tells, right? You always know anytime you see a shepherd that there's going to be some kind of leadership challenge or some leadership adventure that's going to happen. And this story certainly does not disappoint. When God needs to grab our attention, really grab our attention, God finds a way to do it. And in this case with Moses, he did not hold back. Next slide, please. Can you just imagine the sight? A bush that is burning but not consumed. It's hard to even think of that. One of these sermon illustrations that I thought of doing today involved burning things to show how fire is consumed. Thought maybe that's not the best idea. So let's exercise our imaginations together and try to imagine how marvelous this would be to see something and it's not consumed. And I don't know about you, But there are many, many natural wonders that inspire in me this sense of like awe and wonder and expansiveness that make me want to remove my sandals when I behold them. I love the beach. There's nothing like a dip in my native Caribbean Sea. It's nice and warm and transparent waters and pretty fishies, and that's one of those places that just remind me of God's awesomeness. God has my full attention right there. Or maybe going hiking. Does anybody else like to go hiking? Yeah. And when you make it to that pinnacle, I'm like dripping with sweat, for me at least, right? And just panting, and if my partner's there, she's also fussing. And so when you make it to that pinnacle and you see that gorgeous view, and you see that you made it up this trail by the grace of God sometimes, and there's that holy ground. There's that vista that just inspires, that just reminds you of the certainty of holy ground. So I try to imagine what it would have been to encounter this natural beauty, a gorgeous bush. I even imagine a sage bush. And I put the botanical name in the next slide, please. Artemisia cana, a silver sage bush, gorgeous California native. Try to imagine that, wrapped up in flames, but not burning. I wonder if the fire smelled like anything. I wonder if you put your hands to this holy fire, would it give off heat? I just wonder these things, because this isn't just any story, this is our story. So it's worth kind of getting into this. And the thing about taking off sandals when we get there, next slide please, is that sandals serve two profoundly connected theological functions. So for one, Moses said, or God says to Moses, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." Catherine Matthews Huey suggests that taking our shoes off on sacred ground is just as familiar as an idea as kicking off our shoes, because we're comfortable, because we're in our living room, because we're at a good friend's house and we want to curl our feet under us on the couch. It's a getting cozy kind of thing. So in those days, kind of like today, kicking off your sandals would be a sign of hospitality. It means you're going to stay for a while. We're going to hang out. Don't need to protect my feet right now. It's okay. We're gonna kick it. We're gonna hang out. And he says that Moses finds himself in a presence that is unfathomably sacred, a presence that invites him to be at home at the same time as commanding profound respect. And I think that's a beautiful state to be in, to know that you are both embraced and just cozy at home and also reverent at the same time. They're not two separate states of being here. Because footwear protects us from the ground, and it renders us insensitive to whatever our souls are perceiving. So this is an opening up kind of gesture, because God allows Moses, invites Moses to be barefoot with him in the presence of this supernatural fire. Next slide, please. God called Moses into his presence while Moses was in the middle of his daily activities. He wasn't praying and fasting. He wasn't seeking God's counsel. He was at work, right? He was at his job. That's what he was doing. And God didn't have to wait for a special occasion. God is God, and God's going to show up. God's going to show up. In Latino liberation theology, we talk about something that's called lo cotidiano, which is like the ordinary, and finding the sacred in the ordinary. So breaking down the sacred secular divide by saying that yes, God came and created a supernatural burning bush while Moses had punched in. He was at his job. In that moment of the ordinary is where the sacred appears and speaks to us, which is an extraordinary thing to remind us that nothing is ever really separate from God. Doing dishes is not really separate from God. Laboring at our work is not really separate from God. Answering a call at your desk is never really separate from God. God is right there. And it's the storyteller's way of signaling how we come to know God in any time and any place. It's not through knowing something about God. That's what's funny. It's really about being in the place where God is. And where is God not? By telling us that God was in this place where Moses beheld a burning bush that was not consumed, the storytellers conveying something quite specific about where we find God. Fire represents passion and love in the Bible. So the fact that this bush is not consumed is partly the storyteller's way of saying that God is found wherever you find passion and love burning together in a way that does not deplete whatever is fueling it. So passion and love coming together without depleting that source of fuel. So it's up to us to pay attention to where that passion and that love come together in our lives. I wonder how much we miss sometimes when we're not attentive to God in our daily lives, in the most mundane cotidiano of tasks. Moses shifted his priorities to be attentive to God because it's hard to ignore a burning bush. He could have, but he didn't. And God tells Moses that he has seen the misery of the Israelites in Egypt. He has heard their cries. He wants to deliver them to a good and broad land flowing with milk and honey. And the way God plans to do this is by using Moses himself. Can you imagine hearing that? So Moses says, God says to Moses rather, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And what does Moses say? Who, me? That's essentially what he says. I feel for Moses, and I have to confess I'm a big fan of Moses. I even identify a tiny bit with him. Next slide. Not in the big and powerful Moses, beard, streaming hair, streaming raw kind of way, but more in the next slide kind of way. In the, who, me? Oh no, surely not me. I'm a big fan of prophets and leaders who whine a little bit. I think that humanizes that, because who among us has not done a little whining before God? Amen? Can I get a witness? Okay, good. So this story, complete with whining, is the first instance of what's called a prophetic call narrative, where God called God's prophets. And what's interesting is that there's a pattern, and I'll share it because you might even find it in your own life, where basically God gives the assignment, there's an objection. There's always an objection. There's always a point of resistance. There's always you want me to do what? You want me to go where? With who? Are you kidding me, God? Oh, most holy revered one, yes. There's always that moment, right? And then God provides reassurance somehow in a way that we can hear. God provides that reassurance. And then he gives us a sign. She leads us on our way somehow. And that is a pattern that comes all the way back from these stories in the Hebrew Bible. So when Moses says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? My heart knows what he means. My heart understands Moses because I spent years with kind of a similar question. Who am I that I should go into ministry? Me? If we're going to walk together for a while, it's good that you should know my call story. Because my story began, this burning bush moment for me was actually some cool grass on bare feet in the Eastern Oregon campground. Next slide, please. And I was barefoot, and I was at a regional gathering for the Metropolitan Community Church I was with at the time. And we were camping out by this river, and it was gorgeous. I'd been invited to offer communion bilingually, and for the evening worship service. So we have the sunset situation going on, we have the river, we have the frogs singing. Come on, y'all, this was gorgeous. And I get to do what? I get to serve communion. Oh my goodness. I had been praying on stuff. I've been talking to my pastor. I had been just really kind of trying to argue my way out of this. Not the communion, the call. I can do bread, but come on, the rest of it. This moment though, when I was standing barefoot on damp grass, breaking that bread as Jesus taught us to do and feeding God's people, I knew that I was called. And I was shattered with the certainty of everything that meant. It was my call. Unlike Moses, I stalled for a little bit. My pastor got sick with pancreatic cancer, and I got to walk with him during his illness, and I got to be at his bedside the night before he went home to Jesus. And it was a beautiful journey, but as a result, I was like, oh, I'm not sure anymore. And I had nobody to hold me accountable at that point, because our whole community was grieving. And so nobody was there to push me, so I said, you know what, God, here's what I'm going to do. And anytime you start that kind of conversation with God, you know something's, this is what we're going to do, God. Justice, your people, how about it? Yes, okay. So I go into social justice, and I'm doing all these wonderful things. I am caring for God's people. I am learning. I am growing. But I keep catching glimpses of that burning bush, because it's still there, because it is not consumed. Oh my goodness. I keep catching those glimpses, and it wasn't too long before I realized, all right, it's time, fine. Which is pretty much my attitude at the outset. Okay, kicking, screaming. But next slide, I put my walking shoes back on and I marched my behind back to seminary with a full academic scholarship, with a heart full of love for God and for God's people and for the transformation that we can bring together. How about you? What's the call on your life? Because you know this isn't about me or even about Moses. This is about us. And we all have a call on our lives. Next slide, please. It's really when we reach that intersection of love and passion that we find our holy ground. We find our vocation, a call that burns bright without consuming us. Thomas Merton wrote that vocation does not come from a voice out there, calling me to be something I am not. It comes from a voice in here, calling me to be the person I was born to be, to fulfill the original selfhood given by God. And I'll add to what Thomas Merton wisely said, that vocation also comes from community, from seeing gifts in each other, from pointing out, hey, your bush is burning, dude. You see that? I think that one's yours. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. You need to check on that. Moses' heart for the suffering of his people was part of his vocation, because he was connected, because he was in relationship, because he was in loving relationships. Same can be said for us. The question that Moses asks, why me, is an important point in the story, because it reminds us that Moses could have refused. And boy, are we glad he did it, but he could have. He could have turned away. He could have said, you know what, God, thanks, but no thanks. This whole sheep tending gig, they're smelly and they're not too bright. But they're kind of cute, you know, all bouncy, and that's good. The view is great. I have my wife Zippy and Gershie at home. I'm just going to donate a few shekels instead. Dump ice water on my head? No, that's okay. I don't need ice water. That's all right, God. Love your work. See you later. But no, Moses stays with it. And God reassures Moses the same reassurance that he gives us. I will be with you. What more could we need? Now Moses wants to know what God's name is, right? If I'm going to go to these people, that's actually a reasonable question when you look at who all is over there, and they all have different idols and different gods that they worship in different communities. So, okay, that's pretty reasonable. Pharaohs were thought to be gods. We want clarity. If I'm going to do this crazy stuff, I better know who's sending me. I'll do it, but I better know who's sending me. And in ancient times, asking somebody's name wasn't just a couple syllables. It was more like looking at their Facebook page, right? You see their interests, likes and dislikes, family connections, a couple pictures. You get a broader picture. So a name packed a punch, and it's sometimes kind of compacted and boxed in what something could be. Instead, God's answer does something remarkable, kind of like the children's story that we shared a little while ago does something remarkable. When God says, Ehyeh asher heya, I am who I am, which can also be translated as I will be who I will be. Or maybe even I am what I am. This answer is not vague. We read and we're like, oh, come on, God, really? This is so expansive. This is radical because it means that God is still becoming with us. If that is our God, and hallelujah, that's our God, then God is still being who God will be all the way here into the future. San Dimas Community Church, UCC, so many years later, God is still in that place of I will be what I will be with us. That, friends, is absolutely remarkable. God cannot be boxed in, packaged into this tiny little compartment. God is still becoming with us. God is known in what transpires in the future. God's not reduced to time. God's being unfolds in the relationship with God's people. And by the way, that means us. God is still in progress. And if God is becoming among us, then who are we to be done? Who are we to be done as a church and say, we arrived, this is it, no more? Who are we to be done as individuals and say, oh, I had a vocation once, it was great, a couple of years, and I'm done. That was it. No more, se acabó. God calls us to be. And to be is a dynamic thing. So we are surprised with this awesome opportunity to continue to discover new passion in us. It's not about our labor. It's not about what position we hold. It is about who we are called to be in relationship with God and with each other. Will we let the questions, will we let the doubts have that last word? The I'm too poor, or I'm too young, or I'm too girly, or I don't know, I'm too old, or I don't know. I've never tried it that way. Or what if I failed, or what if I look silly? If we take our cues from Moses, we know that a call from God is too important to go to voicemail. In the UCC, we talk, next slide, about how God is still speaking. And God is still speaking with and through and among us. What a wonderful thing to believe and to know and to live into. We know that a call from God is too important to ignore, and that it doesn't just come once. This is not a once-in-a-lifetime thing. This is a relationship. This is a continual growth. Spiritual formation doesn't end at confirmation. It doesn't end with youth group. We are still, praise be to God, being formed together. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. It may take a while. It might take you a minute, like it took me a minute. You might have a wrong turn or two, but that's okay because God is becoming with us. Let's make sure that we go. Yeah? As I did last week, I'd like to leave you with a poem. And this time it's in the words of Marianne Williamson. And I'm going to invite us to sit with it for a moment before we burst into song. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking. so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So may it be.
Amen.
Our hymn of response is number 164, Arise, Your Light is Come.